Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in on a beautiful Tuesday evening, wherever you might be. We are back for another episode of Woo Fantasy right here, presented by Rotoballer.com. And special treat for you, ladies and gentlemen, out there tonight. We are joined by my bro, your bro, the king of bros. It's Mr. Derek Brown. D-Bro, how are we doing this evening? And welcome back to the Woo Fantasy Podcast.
Dude, it's always a good time to be here, baby. It's always a good time to talk ball with you. It's been way too damn long. I mean, oh, good Lord. What has it been, man? Maybe a year, two years, maybe since we've hopped on, maybe three since we've hopped on a show together?
It might be 2 summers. Yeah, it might be 2 summers
ago.
We've
seen each other like physically, like since earlier than that and shit like that. Like we talk and stuff, but it's been a minute since we've been on a show, buddy. So thanks for having me back,
man. Like obviously, I saw you tweeted out a few weeks ago talking about you're looking to hop on some podcasts, and I was like,
yep,
perfect opportunity to bring my buddy back in. Here we are, what, a month away from training camp starting. It feels like time has flat. It was just yesterday. You were down at the Senior Bowl. I was out the scouting combine, getting ready for the NFL draft, doing our prospect write-ups and things like that. And now, June.
6 weeks. Where are we at with? And I'm gonna see you in Flex, right? You going live draft, huh?
Yep, we're gonna be there in NYC like
Let's
normal.
Go, baby. First round on me. First round on me, baby. I got it.
We're going to be fired up as usual because you're going to be back in. I think you're doing Superflex there, right?
I'll do the live draft. I told Jake, I was like, whenever you put me in last year, put me in it again. I'm not a hard person to please, man. I'm like, whatever I did before, which was Superflex on the live draft, I said I'm good to just roll it back unless you need me somewhere else on the live draft.
Yeah, because we had finished the regular PPR draft just before y'all did the super flex, and of course I was sticker bitch for y'all's draft.
Dude, hey, I was doing it before you were. Okay, I did it for the PPR draft. Okay, so everybody gets a turn. Everybody gets a turn.
That.
I remember who was helping me. It was me, I think G-Man J, and then maybe it was Ronus. I forgot who was helping me. We were like popping stickers on the wall, like knocking back shots in between doing them, and then we started screwing stuff up on the board and getting yelled at. And I'm like, look, man, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Okay, don't get mad at me.
That's right. We're doing a live draft in New York City at a bar. What do you expect?
Exactly, dude.
With this crazy group of fantasy experts that we have in this draft every single year. But like I mentioned, man, we're 4 weeks away from training camps opening up. It's just like I think this upcoming Sunday, we're going to be 10 Sundays away from week 1 action.
Cool.
Here we are.
Wow, man. This season still got that new car smell. It's percolating, dude. We're getting closer and closer, and it's crazy how that happens every single year, where it's like the regular season goes kaput, Super Bowl happens, and then it's like, oh, football's never coming. Hey, it's back, baby. Like all of a sudden, like we never left.
Exactly. And now we have a fresh crop of fantasy rankings out there provided by myself, of course, on rotoballer.com. D-Bro has his over there at Fantasy Pros as well. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to jump in and talk a little bit of the quarterback position, look at our tiers, look at the rankings that we have there, kind of discuss some of the ADPs and some of the ECR that's out there, and kind of really lay the groundwork as you're starting that preparation, getting into fantasy football prime time as we get into July, August drafts. Obviously, we got Scott Fish Bowl coming up here in the next couple of weeks.
Geez.
I'm live.
I hadn't even looked at scoring settings for it. I'm going to the live draft in Dallas, and I hadn't done any mocks yet. I hadn't even looked at scoring settings. Scott, I love you. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Okay, so usually, I don't ever usually do any mocks before we go into the SFB. I'll look at scoring settings and kind of get an idea, man. But the way that I'll look at that, and I know everybody kind of gets really competitive with Scott Fish Bowl. I look at it as it's fun. You know what I mean? It's just a fun league. I care about you know what I mean? To me, it's one of those things where it's it's an honor to be invited. It's an honor to take part in it every year. And I think I don't care if I come in first or I come in last. Like, I want to have fun at the draft. I want to help raise money and do whatever with the satellite leagues and stuff and things like that, ever I can. And if I win it, cool. If I don't win it, it's all good.
Yeah, and that's, last couple of years I've hosted, me and my co-host on the podcast, normally Nick Heffley, we've hosted the Atlanta live draft the last couple of years. So now this year I don't have to host. I'm not doing hosting. We're at the live draft in Nashville. We're going to be there with the Roto Grinder guys. So looking forward to that. That's on July 13th.
Oh, I know some people going out to the live draft in Nashville. That's going to be a good time, man.
Gonna be a big time. We've been arguing for a Nashville draft the last 2 to 3 years, and so now it's finally kind of come to fruition. Looking forward to it, but that's a whole different animal altogether. That's obviously super flex, and we can kind of get into that with the mindset of how we're looking at the quarterback position a little bit tonight too. But obviously, we're going to get into this, looking at the landscape and how things are right now. I know a lot of the talk that I saw online or even on NFL Live and things like that earlier today, it feels like we're starting to hit that bubble is about to burst with the quarterback contract situation. Mm-hmm. Tua Tagovailoa is now, he's kind of in that mid-range of I want to get my contract. Obviously, Dak Prescott's in that situation too, but we're looking at Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, these guys getting paid exorbitant amounts
of money. Love's up for a payday soon.
Jordan Love is coming up soon. So It feels like I said the bubble is about to burst on this. And I even tweeted it out a week or two ago. It kind of feels like the situation with the running back position that we've seen over the last couple of years with free agency. Eventually, you're going to hit that wall, and it cannot come to the point to where the next guy is always going to be that top paid next guy. Eventually, you're going to have to cut that off at some point. Not everybody is the best quarterback in the NFL, and we can't justify guys like, no disrespect to Trevor Lawrence, but he shouldn't be getting paid more than a Joe Burrow or more than a Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. And I think that's where we're at this, coming into this season, guys looking at those contracts. Now, how does that affect your mindset when you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective? Guys getting locked into deals and prolonging things out from a dynasty perspective, redraft perspective.
I mean, I think in dynasty circles, it's exactly what you want to see. Is it really boosting the value of quarterbacks per se? No, because they're still going to put up their points. Their game is their game. They're not going to morph into, you get the contract like Jared Goff. He's not going to morph into being a top 3 fantasy quarterback just because he got the extension. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that, for the quarterbacks, it's more of a push. Doesn't really do anything for me. Some of the guys, like in the case of Jordan Love, do you maybe bump him up a spot or two? If you're not accounting for the extension right now, maybe that splits some hairs and makes a difference when in your dynasty rankings and stuff like that. I think more of the quarterback stuff doesn't really impact the quarterbacks for me. It really impacts the weapons around the quarterbacks. Because you got guys that you're looking at those situations like Amon-Ra St. Brown or CeeDee Lamb. Lamb doesn't get paid, he goes somewhere else. Or if Dak goes somewhere else, well, that situation changes, Yep. So I think the quarterback contracts, probably my biggest takeaway for them is it makes more of a value differentiator for all the positional players, especially wide receivers and tight ends, than it does even for the quarterbacks for me.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I look at it, especially with the contract situation, like you mentioned, it's more of a dynasty thought process and looking at how roster build and what you're wanting to do with some of these guys moving prolonged out a few years from now. But coming into the redraft season for 2024, let's look at especially the top tier for the quarterback rankings here. And it feels like that top tier at quarterback kind of is set with the main 4 characters. Now, you can disagree with me if I'm wrong here, but we've got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. That's who's in my top 4 in tier 1. What say you? Do you have any differentials there with your first tier, rankings wise? How are they shaking out?
So my first tier, and I know on Fantasy Pros, those are the top 4 guys in tier 1. My tier 1's a little bit bigger, and the way that I look at tier 1 is if everything goes right, the way that I handle tier 1 is, what are the best bets that if everything goes right, I want, and the way that I compose tier 1 is, can they be the QB1 overall if everything were to happen and hit perfectly? And so while I do have Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes in that tier 1, I also have CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson in that tier 1. And the cases for both those guys are not hard. Like Stroud, we're looking at another year in the system, added weapons in the system. I think the biggest thing for him is, the weapons boost is good with Stephon Diggs and adding Joe Mixon and stuff like that. You're going to get a more efficient offense and, more toys for CJ Stroud to use. The big thing for him, though, I think, is the offensive line and the continuity with Slowick coming back and not taking a head coaching gig somewhere else. That, to me, is huge because you saw moments last year where Houston tried to go pace up. They tried to go pass happy, and it was either the offensive line or the weapons around CJ Stroud just crumbled. Like Nico Collins got banged up towards the end. Tank Dell got hit with a season-ending injury. Robert Woods just lost every bit of juice he had. Noah Brown couldn't stay healthy. And so really some weeks that entire passing attack boiled down to it was Nico Collins and then nothing else. Like Dalton Schultz contributing a little bit tertiary-wise, but not a ton. So like I put CJ Stroud, and I do have, because again, I want to be clear with this, I do have CJ Stroud as my QB4 over Mahomes. And this is not an anti-Mahomes take, but when I'm parsing, really, you're splitting hairs for those guys. The reason I have Stroud over Mahomes, it comes down to I just like his weapons more. And I look at both these guys are going to play from the pocket. Both of them, like Mahomes has a little bit more rushing upside. He's probably going to give you somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 rushing yards. Does that help him over CJ Stroud? Sure. But the other part about KC's weapons is I'm just not as high on them as I am Houston's. Like Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce, but we saw him take a small step back last year. I still think he's going to be awesome. No shade to him. But is that the injury last year, or is that a little bit of age creeping in? Again, I still think he's going to be good. His efficiency metrics are fine. But I'm not massively into Hollywood Brown. Like we've seen foot injuries, ankle injuries really dog him throughout pretty much the entirety of his career. And his efficiency metrics just tanked last year. And so I worry about his ability to stay healthy. I worry about his effectiveness. We still, I don't know, what are we waiting on, NFL? Like, what the hell are you waiting on? Like, we still don't know, is Rashee Rice getting suspended? If he does get suspended, how long is that? Like, how long could you possibly drag your damn feet? Like, I feel like this is one of those situations where kind of like the Saints a few years ago when it was like, we didn't find out about a Mark Ingram suspension until he had like appealed the damn thing like 2 or 3 times. And then they released it all. I'm really wondering at this part of the offseason with like no new stuff is coming out about Rashee Rice. Nothing else is happening. Like, what are we doing here? I wonder if some of those things have been already deliberated behind the scenes. Maybe yes, maybe no. But again, we still have no clue on his availability for this year. And then I could see if everything goes right. Sure, Mahomes has Hollywood. He has Xavier Worthy. He has Rice. He has Kelce. That's great. But what about the downside? What if Rice gets 6 to 8 games? Well, if Hollywood gets hurt or he's ineffective, then you're talking about a KC passing offense that really quickly goes from, oh, they're flush 3 wide and they got Kelce to, is this just boiled down to Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce?
Yeah.
And that's where I split hairs and why I have Stroud over Patrick Mahomes. And I don't need to say anything about Anthony Richardson, man. Like, he's Anthony Richardson. He's going to freaking run. He's going to be awesome. When we saw him last year, literally, he was per game, and I know it's a very small sample, per game numbers, he was outscoring freaking Josh Allen last year on a per game basis. He was first in fantasy points per dropback. So I don't have to make much of a case for Anthony Richardson. He just could be that damn dude this year and could be the QB1. So, like, my tier 1 is bigger than those 4 players. But I approach that tier 1. If you're in my tier 1, I think you got a shot at QB1 overall.
Absolutely, I'll agree with that. Both of those two are next in line for me as far as Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud. So I'm right there, kind of with you, and I'm teetering on the fact of adjusting that tier like you mentioned with yours. And it's funny that you mentioned the Rashee Rice situation with Mahomes and the Chiefs, because I brought that up earlier today in our group chat with Rotoballer online. Is same point that you made. At this point in the offseason, as close as we're getting to the regular season, with no determination on that suspension, who's to say that he does get suspended this year?
He might not.
It could be a situation, and I brought it up, similar to what Alvin Kamara's situation 2 years ago when we were going into that offseason, and we were like, where's the suspension? Where's the suspension? He doesn't get suspended, and they delayed it another season, and he gets suspended last year. The NFL's kind of bringing that to the forefront now, and they're very adamant about they're wanting to let the court process play out and things like that. And I think that kind of plays a factor in this potential suspension for Rice, is that we don't know. It's up in the air. And if he's on the field, I think the additions with Hollywood Brown, I'm a little bit higher on him. I think with the offense and coming in and playing with Mahomes as a quarterback, kind of ups what he can do from a production standpoint. And Xavier Worthy, you and I have our takes on Xavier Worthy throughout the entire offseason leading into the NFL draft and what he can do for this offense. Guy's not just give the ball to him in the backfield, let him run, let him hit wide receiver screens. He has that route tree that he can expand the field with, and a lot of people don't really realize that. So there's different facets to each of these players, and we saw it last year with Mahomes. This offense took it on the chin. NFL defenses were thinking, let's play this too high safety, keep everything underneath it, limit those big plays, and that Andy Reid and Mahomes seems like they went into the offseason with that point in mind. Like, we have to extend the field. We have to try to bring that big play back to this offense. So that brings it more for me on the point with Mahomes. I think there's that chance that last year's more of the aberration just because of what the weapons were, how defenses played them. And I think you can get back to the normal Patrick Mahomes that we're used to seeing from a fantasy perspective. So that's why I've got him in that tier and kind of where I have him ranked right now. I feel a little bit more, not as much of a downside with him coming into this season. I think there's a lot more upside with him coming back into that. But you did mention Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, and you hit on that point, fantasy points per drop back with Anthony Richardson. I think that small sample size that we saw last year, if there's any indication that can be held for 16, 17 games, plus the utilization of the progression as far as a passer with this offense, absolutely you're looking at a guy that can finish as a QB1 in fantasy this year. So I am all for that take that you have there for sure.
He's just a fantastic bet. Like, if you want access to like QB1 overall upside, like it's a rich man. Like, it's stupid the numbers that he put up with, like the 2 full games we got out of, like versus Jacksonville and the Rams, put up 21.9, 29.6 fantasy points. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, and the other thing about it is I think he's a better passer, and people are going to find that out, man. I think that the other thing about Steichen's offense, that the big thing that he always wants to do is create explosives, and they couldn't do that last year. Like, they tried to use Alec Pierce in a role like that. He wasn't suited for it. He just couldn't get open. He was not that guy. And I think that not only the addition, and I'm not a huge AD Mitchell guy, but I think what he's going to provide for that offense is going to help that offense. And I think he's going to have his big splash plays. But I think the biggest thing is, like, that offense is growing around Anthony Richardson. I think that Josh Downs is going to play a really big role this year. Just in terms of, like, do I think he's going to be massive in fantasy? No, but I think he's going to be a much better NFL player and better for A-Rich in that offense as the third weapon, or some weeks the second weapon. The other guy that I'll bring up here too is Jelani Woods, man. Like, I can't say I was ever out on him. I never left. I still love him, love the talent, and I think that he can offer this offense a whole different dynamic that they just didn't have, as well as AD Mitchell last year.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think there's some improvement that can be done with this offense with the additions.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned with Mitchell, I think he brings a different facet, but I agree with you. I'm not as high on him as some of the others as well there. Josh Downs, that's something that a lot of people were not really kind of looking at, was the splits with Josh Downs and Michael Pittman with Anthony Richardson under center in the early stages of last year. There really wasn't that big of a targets differential between both Pittman and Josh Downs with Richardson there. So I think it leads into a little bit of some people being a little higher on Pittman than they should be and forgetting about a Josh Downs. I think that's something to keep in mind with drafts, but obviously Richardson, that rushing utility that he brings to the table, not to mention that division, the same thing we say with Stroud, that division, it's on the come up with an offensive perspective. And they're going to have to keep scoring points. And that's something that I'm keeping in mind with a Stroud, with a Richardson, is that optimization of the offense where they're going to have to be on the field and produce to get those points. And both of those guys have that chance to be up there in the QB1 discussion based on that alone. But we'll move. Now, I did want to bring up one quick point about the ADP for Josh Allen. Back in tail end of round 2, kind of creeping in the front end of round 3. Are you absolutely out on Josh Allen at that price based on the ADP of these other quarterbacks behind him?
Yep, he's the poster child for my must avoid article. People hated it. They thought, like, I remember I tweeted it out when I was writing the article, and right after I wrote up the Josh Allen stuff, they were like, "Oh, you're just doing this for clickbait." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." But you can just say that if you want to. But my thing with Josh Allen is I'm not paying that price for Josh Allen. I'm not, man. And if you look at all the like the 80, first of all, the ADP is absolutely freaking ridiculous. Like, for him to pay off at that ADP, he has to be a difference maker, differentiator from the rest of the quarterbacks, like by a sizable margin. And I just don't think he's going to do that. Like, do I think he's going to be bad? No, I never said that. But do I think that he's going to be this differentiator and he's going to lap the field? No. No. Why am I going to take Josh Allen at where he goes when I can get Anthony Richardson 3 rounds later, and on a per dropback basis, he was outscoring freaking Josh Allen last year? Like, that makes zero sense to me. As well as when we saw Joe Brady take over last year, the passing rate dropped. All of his numbers dropped. Like, his attempts per game dropped from 35 to 32.7, which on a per game basis doesn't sound like a lot, but you add that up over a 17, 18 game season, it's a lot. His passing yards per game dropped from 260 to 243. His passing touchdowns per game dropped from 1.9 to 1.4. And people are saying, well, you're rattling off all these numbers. Well, how the hell did he compensate and he was still the QB1 if all of that happened to his passing volume? Because he had like so many freaking rushing touchdowns. Like, he was tied with Jalen Hurts for the most rushing touchdowns we have ever seen by any quarterback in the NFL ever. Like, Josh Allen on that pace was on pace with Joe Brady as his OC, was on pace for 19 rushing touchdowns. That's how he compensated for the passing touchdowns and all the passing metrics dropping. And it's like, dude, if you think that shit's going to happen again in 2024, good luck, man. Like, want to talk about how you look at regression and the easiest points to say, like, passing touchdown rates, or rushing touchdown rates for quarterbacks. Like, okay, some of these guys are outliers and they can reproduce stuff. You're telling me a guy was on pace for 19 freaking rushing touchdowns in a season? No, that is, nope, that ain't coming back. So
not sustainable.
I can't pay that price, man. No way, no how.
Not a chance. You're absolutely going over what his potential ceiling is by drafting him at that spot.
Yep.
And at that point, you're just doing a detriment to your roster build at that point when you're looking at that. And so, I mean, there's plenty of guys, and we're talking about it, how deep this position is. You mentioned it with Richardson 3 rounds later in ADP. You can go back even, gosh, if you want to trick into it when we're going to get into with tier 2, tier 3, there's guys that you can really absolutely win weeks, week in and week out with some of these guys based on roster build and paying a lesser price at the position. So there's no way. I'm with you there, D-Bro. I can't do it.
I can't even rank him like that. That's the other thing. Like, Brandon, like, I like, even if you go to Fantasy Pros ECR, like Josh Allen is the 21st overall player. Like,
Yeah.
I there's no way in hell I can do that. Like, and I got him, and it's not buried, but like I have him in my ranks. Like, the first QB that I have in my rankings is at 43rd overall. Like, so if you're going to pay up or you're in drafts and you're like, well, I need some Josh Allen in my life. If you're following my ranks, you're probably not going to draft a lot of them. If you're following my ranks, you're probably not going to draft a lot of Jalen Hurts either. Because I'm not paying these insane prices for those two quarterbacks. Like, could it burn me? Sure. Are there a ton of quarterbacks that I love, again, going down that tier one, that I think have similar QB1 overall upside? Yeah. So
Yeah.
why am I going to draft any one of those guys at that price when I can get guys that I think have similar upside if everything hits rounds later?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. It's funny you mentioned it because I've got Josh Allen currently into round 3 in my overall rankings as well. So I'm kind of right there with you. There's no chance that I'm going to get a chance to draft him in most situations because I'm not going to pull the trigger when he's to that ADP point in drafts. I mean, because a lot of people, I'm going to go by the ADP. I'm looking about the ADP when I'm drafting. They're not going by the personal rankings or personal feelings on a player. You're going to see him go, especially in home league drafts. You're going to see a guy like Josh Allen go extremely
He'll be in the second round, and I'll just be laughing every time I see it happen.
I'll be like, thank you for getting him off the board and letting another player drop down. But
I mean, to put him around there, just to put a bow on this, Brandon, like, Kyron Williams is going around where Josh Allen goes. Drake London, Mike Evans, Derrick Henry, Chris Olave, Travis Etienne. Like, I would take all these positional players over a damn quarterback every day.
Every one of them, all day, every day. I agree with you there. So we'll get into, let's go into your tier 2. Who you got in this tier 2? How big is your tier 2? Because we just looked at tier 1. You got 6 in that tier. Let's see how that divide is for tier 2.
Yeah, so I'm kind of flipped with Fantasy Pros ECR. So tier 1 on the site has only 4 quarterbacks, but in the tier 2 they have 6 quarterbacks. I've got 4 quarterbacks in my tier 2. So same, like, it's top 10 quarterbacks, the top 10 guys at the position, but my tier 2 is smaller because, again, like I explained, all the tier 1 guys, but tier 2 I'm pretty chalk with. I've got Joe Burrow at 7. I've got Kyler Murray at 8. I've got Jordan Love at 9, which is a little bit like Jordan Love's at QB 10. The one player I don't have in this tier, or I guess I got a quarterback exchanged for him on the site. Dak Prescott is a tier 2 quarterback. Like, right now he is QB 8. And I don't have him ranked that high. And this is not an anti-Dak Prescott take. I love Dak. Dak is extremely freaking good. I understand he was the QB 4 last year. I get all of that. I don't have him in that tier because, and what we could talk about Dak, or we could save him for the next tier, however, because I don't know where you have Dak, considering all the Cowboy stuff. I mean, what do you have? You have your Dak at QB 1 overall?
I do not. I actually have him square on with ECR at QB 8.
Okay. So in that tier, I do not have Dak, but I do have Jaden Daniels. I love Jaden Daniels this year. I've got him as a top 12 quarterback. I've had him as my QB 10 the entire time. Ever since I did redraft rankings way back when, after the NFL draft, and I was moving guys around. It's an easy bet to make every single freaking year with rushing quarterbacks. If he plays all the damn games, he's going to be a top 12 quarterback. I put him at QB 10 because I want to bump him up a little bit, because the other part about it is I think he's a better passer than anybody gives him credit for. Like,
I'll agree.
And you see those things, all of that stuff is trickling out from camp. Jane Daniels is looking good. He's accurate. He's throwing with anticipation. All the buzz is building, but we don't see that translating to fantasy drafts right now. Like, he's not a top 12 quarterback in multiple different best ball drafts, although he is coming up. ECR has him at QB 14, which I think is laughable. Like, there's no world or iteration where Jaden Daniels needs to be behind Brock Purdy, Tua, and Jared Goff. Like, people are drunk. There's no way in hell that should be the case. Not for a player of his talent, not for the offensive system when you know they're going to run a shit ton of plays. There's no way in hell I cannot have Jaden Daniels inside my top 12.
Yeah.
Now, in saying all of that, I do have Dak Prescott as my QB 13, and he is in a long tier of guys that I think are in that low end QB1 bucket. Like, I have that third tier of guys where it's and we could talk more about tier 2 before I kind of bust into tier 3, but I did want to mention why I have Dak where I have him.
Yeah.
It's just because of the weapons, dude. It's like, yes, CeeDee Lamb is freaking awesome. He's amazing. But after him, it gets ugly fast. Like,
very icky.
I understand the pace is going to be there. I understand the passing volume is going to be there, but we have I mean, we could say, and I know Tony Pollard did not do the things that you and I both hoped that he would do last year, but going from Tony Pollard to Rico Dowdle and Zeke is a downgrade. In their offensive line, you could say they downgraded in multiple spots. I still think they're going to be pretty good, but still some downgrades. If CeeDee Lamb were to get hurt, this offense would crater, dude. Like, Brandon Cooks is not at a spot where he can handle being a number one. Who's even the third wide receiver? Jalen Tolbert? Like, I liked him as a prospect coming out, but I had to adjust all of that after 2 years of him doing nothing. So I don't have high hopes for him. Jake Ferguson is just a dude. Like, he's good for what he does, but he can never be like a high end, truly difference maker tight end. He beat zone coverage. Great. That's wonderful. Tons of tight ends can do that shit. Like, he just gets a lot of volume because there's really nobody else good in the offense behind CeeDee Lamb. If, like, you put him into another offense where he had more competition for targets, he would be an afterthought. So I worry about Dak for all those parts. It's like, if Dak doesn't play at an MVP level like he did last year, he's going to be a low-end QB1, maybe a high-end QB2 if all that doesn't happen and the offense takes another step back. But Brandon, talk me off the ledge. Tell me where I'm wrong, man. What's your tier 2 look like?
So in my tier 2, obviously I mentioned before with Richardson and Stroud, and I've got them riding the fence there with tier 1, but I have a smaller tier 2 as well. I've got Richardson, Stroud, Burrow, then Prescott here in tier 2. And you mentioned Kyler Murray being in your tier 2, and that's kind of the rushing utility you mentioned with Jaden Daniels, and we'll get into that here in a little bit too. That's where the delineation is for me, is where you factor in the rushing utility versus the expectation with the passing production of the Dak Prescott. And for me, all the points that you made as far as the offensive line, I think they're going to be inconsistent at times, but I also think that that's going to be something that's going to help Dak Prescott and not be a hindrance, because with that situation with the offensive line, obviously you mentioned it, Rico Dowdle, Zeke being the two main running backs in this backfield. And if you've followed me on X over the last 2 to 3 months, you've heard my diatribes left and right about this all-in perspective with the running back position that we've had in Dallas over the last few months. That offensive line being inconsistent at best is going to hurt the running game and put more pressure on Dak Prescott, who, of course, mentioned at the top of the show, needs a new contract. He's looking to get that money. And I think Jerry Jones, and the way things are shaping up right now, is they're going to let him play out this year on that contract and not extend. He's already got an extension once before, and this was after the ankle injury that he sustained in Seattle a few years back. And what has he done with that extension? We've not gotten to an NFC championship. We've not gotten to a Super Bowl. There's no production there from the playoff standpoint. Why put more money into him without that production later on in the year?
So, and are you out? Are you a disgruntled Cowboys fan? Like, you don't like Dak? I'm trying to parse it here, Brandon.
I am a realist when it comes to this team. I look at it from, obviously, back before I got into the fantasy industry, it was all, Cowboys great. We're the best team in the league, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, I grew up with the 90s dynasty and all of that. But I'm a realist. Since I got into the fantasy industry, you're looking at things from a more, you're looking at outside the box in, and you really want to be realistic with your views and things like that. So
check the bias at the door. Trust me, I know.
Yeah, you can't do it. So that's what I'm looking at with Dak Prescott is, sure, he was second MVP voting last year. It's a regular season award. obviously we're looking at this from a fantasy perspective. That's a regular season production standpoint. I think all the cards are in Dak Prescott's favor right now. Chip on the shoulder, wants that new contract. The rushing ability of this offense is really not going to be there. The defense is going to take a step back, I believe, obviously, with Dan Quinn leaving and some of the pieces that are on the defense. And what do we look at from a fantasy perspective? We want a bad defense and a good offense. And I think that's going to put more of that onus on this offense to get the ball down the field, got to score the points. Same thing I mentioned with the AFC, South quarterbacks a minute ago. Dak Prescott's going to have to – he's going to be in a position where he's have more pressure on him this year to produce numbers similar to last year where it was QB4, and you mentioned that just now. And now you have a situation where you got both Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb needing contracts, those two working together to the point that they want to blow the doors off the place from an offensive standpoint. So that's where I'm at with Dak, and I think there's some upside. I don't think he's top 5 upside this year, but I think he's obviously in this tier to where you can get that quality guy that you're going to wait a few rounds on that's going to be your QB1 week in and week out. But to put a bow on it myself, that differentiation between Kyler Murray and Dak Prescott is how much weight do you put on this quarterback from a passing perspective versus this quarterback that's going to have more of a rushing utility. And that's where I'm at with, I have a little bit more trust from a production standpoint with Dak because we've seen it in the past from a consistency standpoint, as opposed to Kyler Murray now with Marvin Harrison Jr. in tow and another offseason with Jonathan Gannon and that coaching staff now. I feel there's a little bit more upside with Dak. So that's why I've got Dak one spot ahead of Kyler Murray, who's in that next tier for me.
See, and I view it the other way. Like, I think Kyler has more upside than Dak does. I think that if Dak doesn't cape up and play Superman again, like, and play at an MVP level, because if you would take so many different quarterbacks and if you would take so many different I'm looking at Joey's comment.
I know, that's why I put it in there. I appreciate that, Joey. We are very handsome.
I love you, Joey. Yeah, we're going to have a best dress contest when we get to Flex, Joe. It's going to happen. Which he's going to freaking beat me now. He's out like probably buying some kind of
now he's already
suit
that
matches
he's on Amazon
his freaking shoes and shit, because that's how he rolls, man. Dude's got swag coming out of every orifice. But like with looking at that offense, like, I just look at, like, if Dak doesn't cape up and he's not Superman again, the weapons, if you drop a ton of other quarterbacks in that offense, Dallas wouldn't even be sniffing a playoff spot. Like,
sure,
they wouldn't have been a 12-win team. They wouldn't be, like, right now, I think, like, a good medium projection for them. I think the range is wide, man. Like, I think, like, 8 to 10 wins for them is probably about where I put them. If things were to fall apart and you told me they only won 7 games, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. Like, I just look, he's going to have to play superhero again. And that's a lot to ask out of a quarterback. Can he do it? I mean, he proved he can freaking do it. So I'm not going to say that he can't. But looking at Kyler Murray, he was the QB9 when he came back last year. Like, so it's like, I've already seen what the floor looks like for Kyler Murray. He was QB9. So, like, this year, I think he can do more than be the QB9, and that was his floor that he displayed coming off of injury last year in a brand new offense. And the other thing I'll get out here about Kyler Murray, he was objectively bad as a passer, and he was still QB9. Like, amongst 45 qualifying quarterbacks, this man was 38th in CPOE, 35th in highly accurate throw rate. He had the 9th highest off-target rate. So Kyler Murray produced as the QB9 despite, I mean, honestly, playing terribly as far as a thrower of the football. So for a player that we've seen have top shelf passing numbers, been a highly accurate quarterback, if the passing numbers, or should I say, the ability of him comes back as a passer, and Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride another year in this system, and I think Trey McBride can just blow the top off this year. That's where I think Kyler Murray, as well as with the rushing utility, I feel like he's just in a different area code from Dak this year.
Yeah, solid point. Like I said, I've got them neck and neck. I mean, I could really replace them in my rankings depending on how I view them on a given day. So I'm right there with you. Another guy you mentioned, and obviously, big proponent of him. I'm above market on him as well as Jaden Daniels.
Where do you have him at, Brandon?
I have him right there at QB 12. I've got him as a QB 1.
Love to see it. Love to see it.
And both of from what following you throughout the offseason, rookie ranks and things like that, and both of us have had Jaden Daniels ahead of Caleb Williams pretty much throughout.
He was my QB 1 in that class. Process. I want to get that out there, man. My QB 1. I don't know, where were you at with him? Did you have where did you have him ranked? QB 1?
QB 1. Yeah.
See, I love this.
Going through, I'm getting into, we got into January, scout, senior bowls happening, things like that, and you start getting into that process of studying the prospects. Obviously, I'm down here in the South in Tennessee. I watched a lot of Jaden Daniels at LSU, and there was just nothing that I saw on tape or even through some of the metrics that told me that he can't be the QB1 over Caleb Williams. And then, based on the draft landing spot, Caleb going to Chicago, and I've had my conceptions with Caleb Williams and the landing spot and all that. Jaden Daniels, you mentioned it. We've talked about it ad nauseum to this point right now, is rushing utility. I mean, he's bringing a whole different aspect to the game, to this offense, Cliff Kingsbury's offense. There's so much building excitement, and you mentioned it earlier, of this offense and what can happen here. He's not a slouch at quarterback from a passing perspective. You mentioned that as well. And now you couple that with the rushing utility in an offense that's going to be spreading the ball out. There's going to be a lot of scrambles, a lot of off-kilter plays to where he's going to kind of work his way through the field. My only question to you here with Jaden Daniels is worry meter. Is how worried are you compared to what we saw with Anthony Richardson last year? And that upright running style that has been talked about with Jaden Daniels
a lot.
Yeah. How much are you worried that you're going to see missed time, or a good chunk of missed time that we saw like with Anthony Richardson last year with Jaden Daniels this year?
I'm not. I'll be honest. I'm not. I mean, the thing about it is that, and I feel like social media needs new material. Okay.
Yeah.
They always they use the same 2 to 3 tired ass clips of Jaden Daniels. The game, I think it was against Florida, and there was another play I'm forgetting right now where he gets blown up in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, man. Y'all need new material. Like, if he's got that big a problem, you should be able to make just a long laundry list, like a cut up, like 40 minutes straight of Jaden Daniels getting the shit knocked out of him in the middle of the field. Oh, well, I haven't seen that. Has anybody floated that out there? Because, everybody talks about it. They're like, man, like Jaden Daniels, like he gets blown up. He's trying to make plays. Now, I think that when you get to the NFL, he's going to learn very quickly, and probably walking into the NFL, he's going to learn you got to make some business decisions. And there's other parts in his film, like if you go watch all of his rushing attempts in college last year, and I've done it, there's plenty of times where he's ducking out of bounds, where he's not taking massive freaking hits, but those don't play real well on social media. Now, do they, Brandon?
No, they don't.
You're telling me that like a highly intelligent man playing the quarterback position cannot also, even if we made the banner wide brush stroke statement that he didn't do that, you're telling me that he can't learn how to slide. You're telling me that he can't augment his game and learn how to run out of bounds. That's what everybody's saying, that he can't do that. Okay. It sounds preposterous, doesn't it, when you say it out loud, huh? Because it is. And the other part about it that I go back to is that then they want to talk about his frame. You do realize that Lamar Jackson, the guy that nobody has a problem ranking as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy, Lamar Jackson has the same damn build as Jaden Daniels. Same height, same weight. We don't want to talk about that. Oh, but Lamar is a better rusher. Dude, we're splitting hairs, man. Come on. Like, Jaden Daniels didn't test because he didn't need to test. How many times we got to see him run away from freaking college DBs? He's got speed. He can run. Like, I don't need anybody. I don't need a stopwatch to tell me he's freaking fast. Now, we can split hairs and talk about who is a better open field rushing talent, Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. Fine, let's have that conversation. Sure, Lamar wins that, but you cannot tell me there is that big a damn divide where it's like, oh, well, at his size, I'm not worried about Lamar Jackson, who, by the way, has also missed time in his NFL career because of injuries. But ain't nobody got a problem ranking him where they rank him in fantasy, and I don't have a problem either with it because, again, I have him as a top 5 quarterback. My problem is these shitty, lazy-ass narratives that people cherry pick, and they want to talk about, of this and this and this and this. But this other quarterback that runs the same size, but I don't have a problem with that. Nobody's talking about his problem with that. And that's where I come down on it, man. It's like, it just feels like, how many narratives can we kind of cherry pick to knock the kid down a peg? And that's where I think it's absolutely preposterous. Like, he's going to run. It's the same damn bet we made. And I get that it didn't work out last year because Anthony Richardson got hurt. But if A-Rich would have stayed healthy, he was on his way to a top 10, top 12 quarterback season. He was going to do that. Now, you could tell me about the injuries, but how many other pocket passers can we see that also got hurt? You know, we talk about the injury risk of drafting somebody like Jaden Daniels. Yeah, everybody was still around last year. Y'all did see that Joe Burrow has had a long list of injuries himself. He also sustained a season-ending injury. We ain't going to talk about that either. Like, I hate all the crappy narratives, man. It's just like that people cherry pick the narratives to push down players they don't like, or they haven't done enough homework about, or they just don't want to draft and stuff. But then they ignore them for other players because, we've seen it. I like that player more. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, it's just bad process.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's the fear of the unknown, essentially, is what it comes down to. Yeah, it's that echo chamber that we've talked about from time to time as well. As there's so many points made the same year after, just year after year.
You say one thing against the echo chamber, and even if you back it up with numbers, nobody wants to hear it. And they want to say that you're hot take and all kinds of shit.
Yeah,
okay, fine, whatever. Yeah. Until he does it, or until consensus catches up. And when both those things, then it's like, everybody was saying this the whole freaking sure. Okay, tell yourself that.
I mean, even still, too, like, point to the example of, like, talking about Jane Daniels throughout the offseason leading into the draft. Same can be said with J.J. McCarthy. You and Thor, were out in the forefront talking about J.J. McCarthy, and nobody wanted to hear it. And nobody wanted to talk about it until you got closer to the NFL draft. And it's like, wait a second. This guy is getting talked up pretty heavily. Now maybe I need to double back and start doing my research and leading into things.
Everybody fought it until they couldn't fight it anymore. Basically, everybody tried to knock him down for a peg, and they're all saying, hey, you don't like JJ? Oh, are you an anti-Michigan fan too? Come on, let's go. Come on, we're going to saddle up the posse. Everybody, we're going to go on the JJ McCarthy hate wagon, man. And it's like, they all tried to do it until too many people said, I don't know, this kid can kind of play. And then it was like, everybody's in on JJ McCarthy. Yeah, like, and yes, I'm throwing this out here and I'm sounding very cocky about it, but man, it's like, just do the damn homework. It's not that freaking hard. Like, you can go back to all my stuff. Like, Thor and I had our quarterback episode for the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show. Went live in freaking, it was February 15th or 16th. And those takes, we didn't change them. We didn't go back and re-record anything. You can go listen to that episode and tell me if, in February, how all those takes aged.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, I mean, to your point, I maybe back in January probably would have been a little bit lukewarm with J.J. McCarthy and how I viewed him. But then, things that you were putting out, things that Thor was putting out, and, I'll even point to Brett Whitefield over at Fantasy Points as well.
Oh, my dude. That was his QB1 of the class.
It was, and I remember that. And so that caused me, to really kind of look at my process, go back, look at a lot of the analytics side of things, go study the film of it, and go look at things and kind of redevelop what my thought process is with J.J. McCarthy. That's what we need, and that's the point that you're trying to make too. That's what we need to breed in the fantasy industry more is, don't be afraid to change your narrative of things. If other people have a different thought process, go back and do your homework. Like you said, I mean, look at things from a different perspective, taking all the
whole
information.
Problem with social media right now, Brandon. Like, and some of that's bled over to the fantasy industry in itself. It's like, we used to get on X or Twitter. We used to get on Twitter, And we used to have constructive conversations. It was like, oh, I see where you're coming from, or here's this data point. What do you think about that? That doesn't happen as much nowadays. Like,
No.
people just get on there and you could present data and you could talk about it and you can say whatever you want to. You can make a very compelling case. And lots of times people just see the name, they hear what you're saying, or they see the banner and they're like, oh, he sucks.
Yeah.
So you didn't just listen to everything I just said. That's your response. That's your entire comeback to everything I just said. Oh, he sucks. Oh, you're terrible. Oh, you're a clown. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, where do we lose the ability to have a constructive, educated conversation about it? It's like, we can disagree and that's fine. Like, that's the parts where it's like, it makes you go back and like revisit some of the things. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit too high on this guy, or maybe I'm a little bit too low. And it's like, those things don't happen as much in this industry anymore. And it used to happen a ton, man. It's like, no, you don't have to hate on a player, or, hey, maybe guess what? There's something you might have overlooked. Like, our takes can change as we get more information or as we do more homework. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you can change. It's fine. You can change your mind. It's okay. I promise. You can change your mind as we go through the off season, or as you do more homework on stuff. Like, that's an okay thing to happen. It's fine.
Yeah. It's an ever evolving process. That's what we kind of always have talked about. Just change how your things are, how your views and your outlooks are with certain individuals. It always changes throughout the process. And, like myself, like Debro, a lot of the other guys, whereas this has turned into a year-round process. I mean, you're looking at a guy in January, he might not be the same player that you're looking at in June, where we are now, or in July and August, because you're always you're looking into things. The more research you do, the more homework you're doing on players, and your projections and what your viewpoint is of an offense is always an evolution. I mean, free agency, the NFL draft, this whole thing kind of rounds into form as we get into the summer. And now with training camp, like we mentioned at the top of the show, 4 weeks away. Once you get into the training camp, things are going to change there too. Guys are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen there. It's going to change player outlooks. And you mentioned it too with the quarterback situation, especially. Last year, we saw such a rampant amount of injuries at the position. It really kind of changed how things were looking seasons in. Guys were ranked a little bit higher than they should have been because other players that are usually holding those spots were injured and missing time. So it's always an evolution when we look at things like that.
Well, and I think a perfect player to discuss this kind of, like, it's okay to change your takes on. It's okay as we get more information. I mean, dude, doesn't it feel like we are describing perfectly Jordan Love? I mean, I was extremely hard on him out the gate. He played terribly to start the season, and I was every week in the primer, I'm like, his numbers are bad. Like, he is living off of a ton of touchdowns, and none of this shit is sustainable if he keeps playing quarterback the way he's playing. And then what do we see back down the back half of the season? The light came on, and he started playing at a damn elite level. And that's fine, man. Like, again, like, we're taking in new information, and we have to be liquid with all of this stuff. And it's like, considering what we saw out of Jordan Love in a tale of two seasons, I'm in on him. I love Jordan Love. Like, he's in my must-target players. He is one of my highest exposures as far as best ball goes right now, because he is easy access to possible top 5 quarterback upside this year. Where he goes in drafts, he's one of the best the best arguments out there, along with Jaden Daniels, to why you can wait on quarterback, because why pay up when you can access a guy that was QB5 in fantasy points per game last season, and we might see him reach even another level this year. It's like, that's fine. Kind of like, again, we keep talking about like these types of conversations, and it's okay to be liquid in your process and to ingest new information. I mean, that perfectly describes Jordan Love to me.
Yeah, and he's another prime example. I've got him kind of in that bucket there, 7 to 13 of these quarterbacks that I feel like any given day I can kind of rotate these guys out throughout the rankings. And you've mentioned it too a lot of times. I know, going back into Fantasy Pros Dynasty shows and stuff that I've watched in the past, because obviously I'm an avid viewer. That was a cheap plug there. But you mentioned it a lot throughout the offseason. It was something that I was saying myself too, as far as the rookie rankings for the wide receivers. Everybody was talking about those top three, and you were saying, who's to say that Harrison's the one and Odunze's the three? Who's to say that Neighborson's the one and Harrison's the? You can flip flop these guys because there's so many different aspects that they bring to the table. Things can change with that, and that's how I view a guy.
They're all stinking good. Like that was my takeaway. Like, I don't give a shit who you got, wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 3. To me, it's like you could have made a case for any one of those damn dudes. They're all freaking good. And the takeaway is, guess what? They're all good. Draft them. Don't care.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's how I'm
whereas like on social media, Brandon, like it's like, what? You got Malik Neighbors as your wide receiver 1? Oh, I am mortally wounded.
Don't
terrible.
Look at this guy's
the hot
stuff.
Take is engulfing me. Like, come on, man. Like, jeez, dude. Like, people got to chill the hell out. Like, it's fine. We can have different takes and different processes. And
absolutely.
Like, it's okay if somebody has a different opinion. It's fine, I promise. You're not going to die from it.
It's not going to hurt you. Not whatsoever. So, but no, dialing back to the point of my quarterbacks that range.
Yeah, sorry, I went on a rant. My bad.
Hey, go on those rants.
You opened up the door and I just sprinted on through it.
I'm usually the one that's stepping through the door when I'm hosting the show with other people too. So I'm okay taking the step back and letting someone else kick that sucker in for a change. But no, I mean, obviously you're looking there towards the tail end of that, tier 3, getting quarterback 13, things like that. Those guys, there's so many of these people that are interchangeable that you can wait from a draft perspective. ADP cost, you can get these guys later on, and you still are in a very good position getting these guys and playing them week in and week out. Case in point, we mentioned Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, and to another degree too. And I think, Brock Purdy's going to be a guy that's going to be viewed that way too. There's going to be so many difference of opinion on him as we get closer to August. But outside of that, when you get into those tiers back behind them, I know we're kind of tends to be the case whenever we get to talking about things. We're going a little long, but
it's all good, man.
Outside tier 3, getting into these quarterbacks past there, give me a couple of guys that you're looking at there that have that ability with the offense surrounding them, play callers, what have you, that have that ability to move up towards the end of the season, that are going behind from an ADP cost perspective right now, where you think that they should probably be moved up a tad bit. Give me a couple of guys you're kind of highlighting there.
That are in tier 3 or that are in tier 4 and lower?
Yeah, tier 4 and back. Some of those guys there.
Yeah. So my tier 3, just to lay it out so people know like who's in that. So I'll hop over those guys. Trevor Lawrence is in my tier 3. Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Caleb Williams, and Jared Goff. And people might be surprised. I mean, I'll bring up Trevor Lawrence because I know he's not in a lot of people's tier 3.
Yep.
But I love him this year. I think Jacksonville is going to come out, and I will not be surprised if they're top 5 in pace and passing rate. They did nothing but add weapons this past season. QB 13. He was a QB 7 in expected fantasy points. So I think a lot of that comes back, man. I love Trevor Lawrence. He's actually my QB 11 right now. But going outside of that tier, a few guys that I'd like to highlight here. I think Kirk Cousins is going to be perfectly fine. If you were going to tell me, and Fantasy Pros ECR right now, he is the QB 18. He is in tier 3. He's in my tier 4 right now. I wouldn't be shocked, like a QB 18 right now on ECR. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he, again, he's in that long bucket of guys where I wouldn't be shocked if he's QB 9, QB 12. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I guess the biggest guy, if we want to go really far down the map here, well, 2 guys. I'll bring up 2 names here.
Oh, you're going to hit one of them.
Matthew Stafford is definitely one of the guys I like a lot. If he stays healthy, he's still really damn good at football, man. Like, you look at clean pocket pass ratings, you look at highly accurate throw rates, you look at all the things, the metrics that tell you, is he fallen off or is he still really stinking good? He's still really good, man. And if you look at Matthew Stafford just from a perspective of, if he's still that good, then what hurt him? Like, why did he not do it in fantasy last year? It all comes down to touchdowns, man. Like, Matthew Stafford last year had a 4.6 passing touchdown rate, which is not great. Like, you look at it like that's really what crushed him. All those in close touchdowns, instead of going to the passing attack, they went to Kyren Williams. If any of those touchdowns go back to the passing attack, we see Puka Nacua take another step. Cooper Kupp is healthy all year, and Sean McVay does Sean McVay things. Then Stafford is a guy that, again, mid QB2, could be somewhere percolating around the low end QB1 range. Wouldn't surprise me at all. The other guy, if you are really, really going to wait on quarterback, or you want a guy that I think can outproduce, and I brought his name up, I think it was our Bold Calls episode on Fantasy Pros, still live on the YouTube channel, so go look it up. Geno Smith, man. I think Geno is another guy that I think everybody's idea of how Geno played last year versus basically the narrative versus the reality for Geno Smith, I think they are two widely different things. I mean, if you're just looking at, and everybody's like, oh, well, yeah, but he fell off of passing. He sucked, like he wasn't very good. And I'm like, dude, y'all just don't know, man. Like, Geno Smith it's not that he played quarterback bad. That's not it at all. Like last year, what happened to Geno Smith is he basically got the crap beat out of him. He was behind a terrible offensive line. Now, a lot of the same parts or pieces are back. I think that what Seattle did this offseason was actually very interesting in the sense of, like, they didn't do a lot to change the offensive line. They made a few tweaks here and there and stuff. But the thing about it is that, like, I think they made good bets as far as players that I think as far as health can bounce back. Yep. Geno Smith was top 12 in yards per attempt, clean pocket pass from a clean pocket. He was top 12 in everything we care about, man. But the problem was he faced the 5th highest pressure rate and the 5th highest pressure over expectation rate last year. And so you can't do anything like from like these muddied pockets, and you're basically like, you're under duress every single time you basically snap the damn ball. That's a problem, man. And quarterbacks, can the good ones or the great ones navigate pressure? Absolutely. But if you're telling me any of these quarterbacks are facing a top 3, top 5 pressure rate, it's going to impact their numbers. I don't even care if you're freaking Patrick Mahomes. It might not impact his numbers a massive amount, but it's still going to impact his numbers. When you have to basically play freaking Houdini every damn snap, and you don't have the gifts that Patrick Mahomes has, but you're still a good quarterback in the NFL, it's especially going to affect you even more. So I think if Seattle, if they bounce back as far as the blocking up front, and I'm very high on this offense, like, again, going back to the narratives, dude, it's like everybody sees the head coach and they see Mike McDonald and they say, like, oh, they're going to be run heavy. It's like, what do you have to, like, justify that? What is telling you that they're going to be definitively run heavy? Because what? Because the head coach is a defensive-minded head coach? Okay. You do realize they brought in a pass-happy OC that likes to sit here and throw the freaking ball. Like, Grubbs last year at Washington directed a damn offense that was airing it the hell out. And now you're talking about still an offense that still has JSN, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, hopefully better blocking up front, and you don't think they're going to throw the damn ball? Come on, man. So I think the narrative is wrong on Seattle. I think they block better up front for Geno, and all the numbers that I care about say that Geno Smith played much, much better last year than anybody's given him credit. So Geno is one of the guys, he's probably going to be in my top 3 to 5 as far as most drafted players in best ball.
Yeah, I mean, recency bias with Geno is everybody sees the downside of what he provided last year. But like you mentioned, change of offensive mentality, bringing in Grubbs. They're going to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets there. They're going to be a little bit more up, I think, on pace of play too. So that's going to help him from a production standpoint. And a progression one more year ahead for JSN is only going to help this offense here too. And not to mention, they're talking about they're going to move DK Metcalf around the formation, not just limit him to being that one outside receiver out there and limit the route tree that he can do, getting the ball in his hands. All that breeds success to a guy like Geno Smith. So I like that call. I think he's definitely a guy that's going to have that bounce back year this year. For me, I think that deep dive, and I've kind of mentioned it quite a bit on Twitter, X, whichever you want to call
it. Dear Lord, please tell me you're not going to go where I think you're going to go. I got a feeling in my loins of what name you're about to bring up here.
I thought you were going to hit it, but Will Levis.
I knew you were going to say it. I knew you were going to say it. You are going to have to talk me into Will Levis. Please preach the sermon, Brandon, because you're going to have to preach the good word, man. I'm not. I think there are parts or pieces to Will Levis, but you lay out the case and we'll discuss.
Because I think from a perspective of, obviously, you know, what we do watching prospects coming into the NFL, and me being an SEC homer and watching tons and tons of Will Levis at Kentucky, obviously coming into the NFL, I was like, this dude doesn't have it whatsoever. And little bit what we saw last year, you know, you could say that that's accurate. That's an accurate assessment of what we could see. But I think there was enough flashes, bits and pieces that we saw last year that showed the Tennessee Titans front office, let's do the right thing by this kid. Now that we're going to change off, you know, we're changing head coaches, we're bringing in a new scheme. Callahan's coming in kind of with that more of that Cincinnati Bengal type of mindset with that offense, bringing that in. They bring in Calvin Ridley. They bring in Tyler Boyd from Cincinnati, who's going to be able to kind of be that security blanket and really kind of help this offense on those, you know, third and long type of situations, be a chain moving type of a guy that they're going to look at. The front office is doing everything they can to put the pieces around him to help him, because they need to see it. And we talked about it at the top of the show. Quarterback contracts being what they are, they need to see it now. And they're going to put all these pieces around him. And not to mention what I've already said about the AFC South and potential points that are going to be had with those teams and, you know, these matchups. I think the Titans and that defense, going back to the Dak Prescott, point I made earlier too, that defense is not going to be great, which leads to opportunity, and opportunity leads to production. Sometimes you'll see forced plays, interceptions, negative plays like that, but the chances are that Levis is going to be a guy that's going to have those opportunities. He's got playmakers out there. DeAndre Hopkins, whether he's washed or not, he's getting up there in age. He's a little long in the tooth, that we like to say. But Calvin Ridley now coming back, a full season back from that suspension, got his little sea legs under him last year. Coming into this offense now, I think there's going to be a chance that he can prove himself now, and I think he overtakes DeAndre Hopkins in this offense this year too. I think there's just those pieces there with all the narratives at play. He's one of these quarterbacks that's going to be kind of like a Blake Bortles. Let's say that back a few years ago.
Yeah, I could say
can pile up the points late in games because the defense has put them in a spot that they're playing behind those negative game scripts. So he's obviously a guy, I think you're not looking at him as that, oh man, Will Levis, I've got to draft him, but he's a QB2 that you can get that's going to wind up finishing higher than expected because of those opportunities and because of that junk time, garbage points pile ups that you're going to see late in the season. So that's, for me, he's the reason that he's on Underdog right now. He's my most drafted quarterback, because based on ADP, I'm nabbing him all day long, whether he's my QB2 and I wait a long time to grab that QB2, or if I'm in a situation with my roster build and I'm grabbing a QB3 just based on bye week situations and playing the narratives, I'm going to grab him and have him plugged in there as well. So that's my selling point for Will Levis.
So I'll give you the positive case and I'll give you the downside of him. And God, I don't want to. I'm gonna start it off this way. I think in the best case of scenarios, 2024 Will Levis can be 2023 Sam Howell. And for everybody that like looks at where Sam Howell finished the season, they'll say, "What the hell are you talking about? He was QB 18 and fantasy points per game. He sucked." He was not on the trek of QB 18. Like, what killed Sam Howell's fantasy season was the final 4 weeks of the season where he finished QB 29, QB 38, 31, and 26. Before that, so the first 13 weeks of the season, Sam Howell was the QB 7 in fantasy.
Yep.
And he did all of that through a lot of volume, and he played terribly, but the volume carried him to a really good fantasy season. I don't think Sam Howell, I never thought Sam Howell was a good NFL quarterback. And I feel the same way about Will Levis. But what do we care about as far as fantasy-wise and scoring points and things like that? We can get bad QB play, but if the volume is there and the touchdowns and all that kind of stuff is there, then we don't really care. Like Jameis Winston a few years ago, he played terribly. Like he led the freaking NFL in interceptions. He played like shit. Did it matter in fantasy? Nope. Didn't matter at all. Ryan Fitzpatrick, is anybody ever going to talk about him as being like just an amazing quarterback? Did we care in fantasy? Nope. Blake Bortles, did we care in fantasy? Nope. Like, so we can differentiate between fantasy and reality in that instance. I think the best case scenario for Will Levis is that the volume really helps him in Tennessee. The weapons around him are good. I think they are. You know, Tyler Boyd's not amazing, but he's solid. DeAndre Hopkins is not totally just ready for pasture. Calvin Ridley played pretty good last year. I think there's a lot of, if he'd have come down with half the passes that he dropped or fumbled or 1 foot in and not 2 feet, his season would have turned out quite differently than it did. And so can you see that in a different offensive system, another year with his football legs back under him? Definitely going to be possible. But I think that's the bull case for Will Levis, is him being 2023 Sam Howell. Now, the downside for Will Levis is I just don't think he's that good of a football player. Like, if you look at last year, amongst 45 quarterbacks with at least 150 dropbacks, this is where Will Levis finished in metrics that I care about. He was 45 quarterbacks. 41st in adjusted completion rate. He was 32nd in highly accurate throw rate. He was 41st in catchable target rate, and he had the 4th highest off-target rate.
Yep.
All of that is bad. It's about as bad as you can get.
Sure.
But to your point, Brandon, Tennessee is setting him up to say, look, we added a lot of weapons. We added to the offensive line. We even brought in an offensive-minded head coach. If you can't succeed in this year, screw it. We're going to sit here and draft another guy next year. That's what's going to happen, because Tennessee is set up like that. They're set up to take advantage of. Now, we can all quibble about the moves they made, signing Pollard and all these other guys in the offseason. We could talk about that for days. But I think that while we can kind of like, you know, try to knock down those moves a peg and say, oh, they weren't good, or they're just doling out, burning through money and stuff like that, what they're doing is they are trying to take advantage of a rookie quarterback contract. If Will Levis is not good enough to do that this year, they will move on and they will draft another guy next year, just like Washington did after Sam Howell flamed out.
Sure.
Now, Will Levis is going to get every opportunity. He's going to get this season, because there's nobody behind him. Like, they're not going to go run out Mason Rudolph. They're going to give Will Levis every single freaking chance to prove that he can't do it for a full season. So the bull case is he could be this year's Sam Howell. The downside is he implodes, and, you know, by week 12, week 10, Tennessee says, okay, maybe we're sniffing around 500. Will Levis is absolute hot garbage. Maybe somehow we can limp into a wild card spot if we put Mason Rudolph back there. That's the downside. But the upside is he could be this year's Sam Howell.
Right. So to the metrics, I'll counter some of those points too with what we mentioned earlier as far as the offensive line situation last year being absolute hot garbage. And I think you saw a lot of Will Levis's metrics when you talk about off-target throws and things of that nature. I think you saw a lot of YOLO balls, like we like to talk about. You know, limited time to throw in that pocket.
Will Levis loves his YOLO balls.
Just slinging it, just tossing it down the field, like hoping Hopkins falls through it because he's under duress and guys are in his face. So I think that might be kind of the shift with his metrics a little bit, or at least that's what I'm thinking from that perspective. And that's where
I'm pulling something up right now, Brandon, to see if you're right. I'm pulling up just clean pocket stuff for Will Levis, and we'll see how Mr. Levis did.
Because that was, also a point of contention for the front office this offseason is reshape that offensive line. You talked about it with Geno Smith. They needed to make some changes. And that was why we kind of saw it a lot with Derrick Henry last year in the rushing. Just struggle behind that offensive line to a degree.
So, all right. So, do you want me to read off these clean pocket stats?
Yeah, hit me with them.
Okay. So amongst 45 qualifying quarterbacks from a clean pocket, Will Levis ranked 40th in adjusted completion rate, 36th in highly accurate target rate. And let's see where are you at, Levis? And he still had the 5th highest off target rate. So even from clean pockets, it wasn't good. But again, to your point, different offensive system, lots of upgrades, second year of the system. Even though I don't think that he's good,
I don't either.
Could that still not matter at all in fantasy? Yeah, could matter not at all. Like
exactly,
he could Bortles his way to a top 12 quarterbacks this season in fantasy.
That's what I'm banking on. That's why he's that late round target for me when I'm looking at that situation. So on the flip side,
Will Bortles?
Will Bortles. Let's trademark that. Let's put that out there.
Will Bortles?
Will Bortles.
So many ways you can go with that. Will he Bortle? Will he not Bortle? Oh, it's just Will Bortles.
Yeah, anyway. It's just Will Bortles.
Sorry, I'm in a dad joke mood right now. Everybody's just gonna have to bear with me. It's a moment.
So then, on the flip side of that, let's look at your absolute fade at ADP right now at the position going into 2024. Who's the guy that you're just looking? We mentioned Josh Allen at the beginning. We're just that outrageous second round ADP. Outside of Josh Allen, who's the guy that you're looking at where he's getting drafted right now, and you're just like, I'm out. I can't touch it.
I think Josh Allen is the big one. I also think in that same kind of bucket, I'm not going to draft a ton of Jalen Hurts, only because of where he goes in drafts. I will take the swings in some best ball drafts. Any redraft leagues, I'm probably not drafting either one of them just because of their cost. But I will take the swing on Jalen Hurts a little bit in best ball, whereas opposed to Josh Allen, like, I don't know if I've drafted Josh Allen. Like I'm about 40 or 45 teams in right now in best ball.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've drafted Josh Allen more than maybe once.
I think I got a 0 burger on him right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just avoiding him a lot. I don't have a ton of Patrick Mahomes, although I see the reasons for him. In the range where he goes, I just find myself drafting Stroud. I find myself drafting Lamar. I find myself drafting or waiting on Anthony Richardson.
Yep.
So not going to have a ton of Jalen Hurts, but I will have some. I'm basically out on Josh Allen. I'm probably going to be at or below market on Patrick Mahomes. I'm looking at other guys here. I think one of the biggest guys we've already discussed ad nauseum is unless I get the first or second overall pick in a best ball draft, I'm not drafting Dak Prescott this year. Like again, there's other guys at his cost or a little bit later that I can make a good case for. Like, why draft Dak when I can get Jordan Love a little bit like sometimes later? Why draft Dak when I can get Trevor Lawrence? Why draft Dak when I can get Brock Purdy? Well, so a lot of those different guys I'm just not drafting a lot. A few of the guys that I'll bring up here that I'm not pressing the button on that much. Justin Herbert, hey, it's tough to see the upside case scenario unless he is just stupidly efficient or he ends up which he is hyper athletic, man. Justin Herbert does not get enough credit for how freaking athletic he is. Mm-hmm. If he, in a Greg Roman system, if he runs for 500 yards, which I think is possible, could he outperform what my expectations right now and he's super efficient? Could that happen? It's possible. The other side is, could he just be a middling QB2 that's locked inside of a run-heavy offense, touchdowns don't go his way, and he's sitting somewhere on a weekly basis of QB 14 to QB 18? I think that's definitively possible. So I'm not drafting a ton of Justin Herbert. I think that's pretty much it for the guys that I'm just kind of avoiding. Outside of I'm not drafting, and I will say this with confidence, I'm not drafting any Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson. Deshaun at this point, I just think he is who he is, and he's bad. So you can't. You'd have to pay me, and you'd have to pay me a healthy sum of money for me to draft Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield. I think a lot of it was Dave Canellis magic. Could they reproduce some of that this year? Sure. That offensive line is still probably bottom 5. Yeah. So if they don't scheme things up for Baker and that offensive scheme takes a step back, I think that offensive line is just, it's bad. And they didn't do enough this offseason to upgrade it. So I'm definitively like in those later rounds. Why do I draft Baker Mayfield when I can wait on JJ McCarthy or Will Levis, or I'll take shots on Derek Carr? I'll draft Geno Smith. Like, I'm not drafting him, not drafting Deshaun. And again, somebody's gonna have to pay me to draft Bryce Young. Like, I was not I was not in on Bryce Young as a prospect. He was QB1 for a lot of people. I did not have him as my QB1.
Nope.
People can go back and check the receipts. Like, I saw more limitations to Bryce Young's game as far as his accuracy, his arm strength, his ability to play from the pocket than a lot of people came. And I'm not trying to take a victory lap, but the numbers are what they are, and his rookie season is what it is, man. And so I hope the kid turns it around. I hope Canellis can help him turn into at least maybe his new Baker Mayfield 2.0. I don't know if that happens, but I hope for his sake it does happen. But again, I can't paint you a really good picture for Bryce Young. Like right now, I have him as my QB 30 in my ranks.
Oh man, I'm not very far off from you on that one. But the same point with Deshaun Watson, he is absolutely on my no draft list.
Where do you have him ranked? Because I don't know if I'm at consensus or below or where people are on Deshaun. Because I'm not drafting him. So
currently QB 24.
Oh, I think are we handle? Oh, I'm QB 25. Let's go, baby.
There's no chance. It's just he's a guy that I viewed at over, especially like the course of last year.
Where is he at in ECR? Oh, he's QB 21. So yeah, we were below market. Thank God.
Have to be below market on him. I look at him as a guy that, you know, he got that contract and we saw a little bit of a step back from his work ethic. Yeah, sure, he got banged up and he's injured, but you could even see last year things felt off. And now you're seeing it a little bit playing into that off-season program and stuff too, where he's just, you know, I'm not throwing today, I might throw tomorrow, things like that. There's just bad narratives out there. So for me, I'm off on Deshaun Watson. Yeah, they bring in Jerry Jeudy, but who's to say Jerry Judy's maybe that great at football? Ask Steve Smith on that one. But
I'll trust Steve on that one. Trust me. I'll trust Steve on that one.
But you mentioned Jalen Hurts too, and he's definitely another guy, you know, going high in ADP right now. Another change in offensive philosophy. They're bringing in Kellen Moore right now, which I think that's more of a boom for, I think, AJ Brown, because Kellen Moore's kind of the guy that likes to target that number one wide receiver and just pepper them with targets. So I think that's a good situation for AJ Brown. But the downside, you know, who's to say what we're looking at from the tush push situation there? You know, Kelsey's retired. We saw Hurts at the end of last year kind of playing banged up, and they didn't really want to put him in that position as much. Now you've got Saquon Barkley back there, and you paid him a contract. Give that guy the ball around the goal line. So that's something I think you see a little bit of regression from Jalen Hurts with a rushing utility there from, you know, the touchdown perspective. So I'm off on him as well, and I'm off on Caleb Williams. He's the other guy. I think he's going to go a little bit earlier.
Where do you have him ranked at, Brandon?
QB 15 right now.
I got him at QB 14. So we're basically the same area code.
I just don't know if it's going to be there in year one. And that offense, yes, you know, maybe with all the weapons that they brought in, we mentioned it with Will Levis. But for me, I can't find myself going away from the narrative, you know, and even what I've talked about several times on X and Twitter throughout the offseason is I keep bringing up the point, you know, he's going to have to be the first ever QB in Chicago to throw for 4,000 yards and over 30 touchdowns to become the guy that a lot of people think that he's going to be in year one. And I don't think it's there, not yet. I think this is going to be something they're going to have to progress. So he's a guy that I think is going to go higher in ADP, especially in home leagues, than what I'm going to probably target him at.
I think some people will draft Caleb before Jaden Daniels, and I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
There's one guy we didn't talk about, and I kind of want to pose this because I don't think you're going to get this name, Brandon, but maybe you do. Not to go to rewind this all back to the love list, guys, but this is something that I found when I was looking up Jordan Love stats the other day, and it really opened my eyes. Okay, so I'm gonna lay this all out, and I want you to guess the name of this guy. Okay, weeks 13 through 18, this quarterback led all NFL quarterbacks in passing touchdowns. He was second in PFF passing grade, and he was first in adjusted completion rate. Who is that quarterback, Brandon?
Oh my goodness!
And this is gonna. I don't want to spoil it. I'm gonna answer one. I see Streets here in the chat. I'm gonna answer a question for Streets here in the chat too.
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark here, and it's probably not close.
Mm-hmm.
Russell Wilson.
Is Derek Carr, dude.
Derek
freaking Carr did all of that. Like, just to rewind this. So he was weeks 13 through 18, led all NFL passers in passing touchdowns, was second in passing grade, and first in adjusted completion rate. When I came across that looking up Jordan Love stats, I was like, holy shit. Okay. Yeah. Well, wow. I'm not telling you I love Derek Carr, but I mean, changing the offensive system,
Kubiak coming in
a lot. Like, I'm going to draft more Derek Carr than I originally thought I was. So, and yes, Streets, just to give it away, yes, I am a Saints homer. God darn it, I'm going to get this right. All right, there's Drew Brees on my mantle behind me, and there is Saints potato head right there. So, anybody
I knew you
looking in the background.
Guy.
Yep. That's why I couldn't say it. Like, I couldn't say too much and give it away because I know I'm a Saints guy. So like, I couldn't answer that question before I got to the trivia question I wanted to pose to you. But no, man, like, that honestly opened up my eyes about Derek Carr. And I'm not telling people that he's going to be awesome. And I have big time concerns about the offensive line. But am I taking him in like some super flex drafts, or am I going to take him in certain spots like in best ball and stuff? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to draft him a little bit, and some of those numbers did open my eyes.
No, I agree with you. He's a guy that I've gotten several times as a QB3 so far, and the Superflex puppy drafts. I've done several of those, and he's kind of landed in that spot for me. Even going back to last year, and I kind of really should have thought about it, that he was my QB drafted QB2 in the Scott Fish Bowl last year. Mm-hmm. And really was kind of making hay for me late in the year. It was him and Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy was my drafted QB3 last year, and both of those guys were just carrying me because guess who was my QB1? Joe Burrow. So I needed some help there. So, but they did the job. They got things done. So I'm not surprised by that. But I'm with you. He's definitely a guy that is falling under the radar right now. I think signs are pointing up for that offense because of Kubiak coming in. Things are looking good for Olave there.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's people that have some excitement about Rashid Shaheed. And so I think there's some buying potential there. And if Kendre Miller if he's the guy that a lot of people are wanting to hype him up to be right now, is that progressive rookie coming into year 2 and tries to take over a little bit of the backfield work there. Gets a little bit of the pressure off of Derek Carr in the passing attack. Sure, yeah, that's a guy that you can wait on super, super late. Probably not going to get drafted in a lot of the quarterback leagues.
He won't be drafted in a lot of one quarterback.
So leagues. He's definitely going to be a waiver wire guy that you can look at later on and pluck him and hope for the best. I mean, not to mention there's going to be a good chance schedule wise they're looking at a good solid schedule.
I was just pulling up his schedule and stuff, and like there's a few different spots where I could see myself streaming him. Like week 14, he's got the Giants. Week 15, depending on what the Commanders do. Week 16, Green Bay's defense isn't exactly somebody that you got to worry about. He gets Carolina to open the season. What does their defense look like? I think that there's some definite spots where I'm probably going to be higher than consensus in weekly rankings on Derek Carr.
Absolutely. I'd agree with you. Oh, man. Feels like a marathon. But I think we've put a bow on this puppy. We're here to the end. Hopefully we've provided with a lot of information for you guys this evening, talking about fantasy quarterbacks there. But let's end things up here, and I'll switch things over to you there, D-Bro. Let them know where they can find you, content, whatever you need to plug, shoot it in there for everybody on the stream there.
All the social handles are _FFB. So X, Insta, TikTok, whatever. Find me on all the platforms at that handle, and all the content's over at Fantasy Pros. Our redraft kit is already live, so fantasypros.com/kit. If you are getting back into the mindset of redraft and fantasy and all these things are going to be here before you know it, you need to be doing mock drafts. I mean, look, it's just like everything else. You don't use those muscles for a while. They get kind of lackadaisical. They get a little bit soft. You got to train them up. You got to do the mock drafts. So head over there, use the draft wizard. It is freaking awesome, as well as all of our kits. So you're doing best ball. The best ball draft kit is live, as well as redraft. Like I said, I've got about 8 or 10 articles in the redraft kit that are already live. I still have to finish up my cheat sheet. I'm doing this year, I haven't decided yet. I'm probably going to do the full 150. I'm going to have my top 150 eventually live on fantasypros.com, and that's 150 players with every single player with a full write-up live on the site. I'm probably somewhere around the 100 and 115 mark right now.
Yep.
So trying to finish that out. But really, the main article for everybody that's already live on the site, and it will be updated as we move through the off-season to account for ADP shifts, injuries, all that kind of stuff, is my perfect draft article. That is live. Go head over to fantasypros.com. In that article, I run through 75 plus players, 20 plus players in the later rounds of drafts that I am targeting everywhere. In best ball, I will be targeting them in redraft all year long. Really, I wanted to just flesh that thing out, and I wanted to come out with an article that I felt like if you only used one thing for your draft season, this is the article that I wanted to write so everybody could use that. Pull it up, and it walks you through every single round of players that I'm targeting at the beginning, middle, and the end of every round, as well as all the late round guys.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something to check out because, D-Bro, myself, we were pushing that narrative like nobody's business on Puka Nacua last year, and look what that did for you.
We were.
Also, Sammy Laporta, where
baby.
we were very high on him last year coming into the NFL season. So go check that stuff out over there at Fantasy Pros. D-Bro's work is fantastic, and also anything that goes up on the YouTube, love to watch him give the business to those guys on the show because it's always fun for me to watch while I'm in the gym.
You're gonna get a good one, man. Anybody that's this should be live tomorrow or the next day. We actually just recorded today. It was me, Joey P, Welsh, and Scott Bogman did a PPR mock draft. I actually, so a little bit of teaser, I went full 0 RB with my team. So it's a good, anyway, if you're going 0 RB, I think it's definitely it's a good year to do it.
Yeah.
But oh man, that was a really, really fun show. So that should be live on YouTube. Probably the podcast feed tomorrow morning, YouTube tomorrow or the day after. Talk about giving the business. Oh, we got after it, man. That was a fun time.
Good deal. Oh man, but I appreciate you coming on, man. It was a blast having you on here. If we don't talk again in person like this before the Flex in New York City, gonna get to see each other in person again. Give each other a big nice hug like we did last year.
Absolutely,
and it'll be fantastic. But
as much weight as you've lost him, but since the last time, I'm gonna get both my arms all the way around.
The way around, sir. Yeah, dropping the weight like I'm the thinner. Like Stephen King's got a hold of me over here.
I mean, shoot, dude. I mean, props to you, man. I mean, definitely, like seriously, mad respect because it ain't easy to do that in general, and it sure as hell ain't easy to do that whenever you hit the big 4-0, dude. So
exactly,
massive respect for what you're doing. Love it.
I appreciate that, man. And till next time, ladies and gentlemen, I am at Roto Superstar, and we will see you again on another episode of a Woo Fantasy right here on Rotoballer.com.